George Zimmerman has already admitted that he shot and killed Trayvon Martin. In this new interview, though, he lays out his version of what happened on that fateful night back in February, and some of what he says is slightly different from what he's told the police in the past.
He did offer an apology to Trayvon Martin's family. He says, looking back, though, there's nothing he would have done differently. And as we mentioned, we're going to talk about the interview with Martin's parents in just a moment.
But first, let's get right to NBC's Gabe Gutierrez. He's in Sanford, Florida, with more on Zimmerman's comments. Good morning to you, Gabe.
Good morning, Matt. At times during the Fox News interview, George Zimmerman apologized to Trayvon Martin's family, his own relatives, and even the American public. But it's the statement he made that this is all part of God's plan that's sparking the most controversy, a comment he eventually clarified.
Do you regret getting out of the car to follow Trayvon that night?
No, sir.
Do you regret that you had a gun that night?
No, sir.
In the interview on Fox News Channel's Hannity, George Zimmerman insists he did nothing wrong.
I feel that it was all God's plan, and for me to second guess it or judge it.
Is there anything you might do differently in retrospect now that time has passed a little bit?
No, sir.
Still, he had these words for Trayvon Martin's parents.
I am sorry that they buried their child. I can't imagine what it must feel like, and I pray for them daily.
Zimmerman is free on bail after pleading not guilty to second-degree murder. He admits shooting the unarmed 17-year-old in February, a few blocks from his townhome, but he claims it was self-defense.
He grabbed me by the head.
In this reenactment, he told police he feared for his life that night.
Are you following him? Yeah. Okay, we don't need you to do that.
So why did he continue to follow Martin, even after a police dispatcher told him not to?
I meant that I was going in the same direction as him, to keep an eye on him so that I could tell the police where he was going. I didn't mean that I was actually pursuing him.
Zimmerman says he lost track of Martin and that he only left his car to find an exact address for where he was. But Zimmerman claims Martin soon confronted him. Then he says Martin began punching him more than a dozen times and pinned him to the ground. He recalls they both reached for Zimmerman's concealed weapon.
At that point, I realized that it wasn't my gun, it wasn't his gun, it was the gun.
Did he say anything? Because you said he was talking a lot about the gun. Did he say he noticed the gun?
He said, "You're gonna die tonight."
Zimmerman says he didn't realize he'd actually killed Martin until about an hour after he was taken to the police station. The incident drew attention to Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which allows someone with a reasonable fear of death to use deadly force. But Zimmerman revealed he'd never heard of the statute before the shooting. The case gripped the nation. Civil rights leaders protested the initial decision not to prosecute Zimmerman. They argued the neighborhood watchman racially profiled Martin, a claim Zimmerman strongly denies.
I'm not a racist, and I'm not a murderer.
He blames a rush to judgment.
I think that people assumed I was white because of my last name. My father is Caucasian, my mother's Hispanic, but English was my second language.
And despite saying he had no regrets earlier in the interview, Zimmerman closed by clarifying that he did wish he had not been forced to take Martin's life, as he looked straight at the camera.
I'm sorry that this happened. I hate to think that because of this incident, because of my actions, it's polarized and divided America, and I'm truly sorry.
Zimmerman never specifically addressed why he was speaking out now. Fox News says it did not compensate him for that interview. Matt?
Gabe Gutierrez in Sanford this morning. Gabe, thank you very much. Trayvon Martin's parents, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, are with us now, along with their attorney, Benjamin Crump. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Ms. Fulton and Mr. Martin, did you watch the entire interview last night?
Yes. Yes, we did.
And did you find anything particularly revealing about what Mr. Zimmerman said or the way he said it?
Yeah, I found a lot of things revealing about what he said. First and foremost, he had no regards for Trayvon's life, and he don't regret taking Trayvon's life. Had George Zimmerman stayed in his vehicle, Trayvon would be with us here today.
I don't know that he said he doesn't regret taking his life. He says he wouldn't have done anything differently. He also said he's very sorry that you buried your child. He says, quote, "I can't imagine what it must feel like, and I pray for them daily." And then he also said this, and it's getting a lot of attention this morning: "I feel it was all God's plan." Ms. Fulton, what's your reaction to that?
I really think that's ridiculous. I wish Trayvon was here to tell his side of the story, and I don't believe that's God's plan for him to kill an innocent teenager.
He says that there's nothing I mentioned he would have done differently. He claimed that he wasn't actually pursuing your son that night, that he only got out of his car and was going in the same direction, and he got out of his car so he could get an exact address to give to the police. Do you think that's what happened that evening?
Matt, it speaks for itself when you listen to the objective evidence. Just listen to the 911 tapes. There are so many inconsistencies in the things that George Zimmerman is saying. The state attorney is going to look at that interview that he did last night as a gift when they cross-examine him.
We don't know who initiated the confrontation between your son and George Zimmerman. Only George Zimmerman is alive to know that right now. We do know it turned violent. We do know both reached for a gun. We know that it ended with your son being shot. George Zimmerman says he was punched more than a dozen times, and that at one point your son said to him, "You are going to die tonight," and then an expletive. Mr. Martin, Ms. Fulton, can you imagine your son saying those words? Is it possible for you to imagine that, even in the heat of a fight like this?
No, Trayvon is a child. He's a 17-year-old child, and I can't imagine him saying something like that. He was frightened for his life.
Those are the words of George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman said they were fighting over the gun. There are no witnesses that say that they were fighting over the gun. George Zimmerman is here to tell his story. Trayvon is dead.
Yeah, but I understand, but are you answering that question through a parent's love and unconditional approval? Is it possible that Trayvon said those words?
Matt, it's just George Zimmerman's version. You listen to his words, he says so many things. It's about his credibility, and I think everybody in America would say his credibility cannot be relied upon.
And Mr. Zimmerman says he's been unfairly convicted in the court of public opinion, that there's been a rush to judgment. Would you agree that he deserves to be treated as an innocent man until he is proven otherwise?
I think by him saying there's a rush to judgment, there was a rush to judgment for him to think that Trayvon was suspicious. So, you know, for him to think that we're rushing to judge, he rushed to judge Trayvon.
And quickly, Ms. Fulton, he says he would be open to talking to you. Is there any interest on your part to speak to George Zimmerman?
Absolutely not.
Sabrina Fulton, Tracy Martin, Mr. Crump, I appreciate your time this morning. I really do.